Washington, D.C., 1930. In a smoke-filled war room, America's generals reveal a secret plan.
The targets on this map were not the flags of Nazi Germany, nor were they marked with the red star of the Soviet Union. At the very center of the map, a territory marked in heavy red ink, ruling the oceans, the British Empire. This is no movie. This is War Plan Red, a classified Pentagon document against Britain and Canada. I believe America and Britain are eternal friends. But in the interwar years between two world wars, their relationship told a very different story.
Pentagon strategists believed the single greatest obstacle to unchecked American global supremacy was the British crown itself.
And so, Washington's top generals engineered the most secretive, ruthless, and dangerous war plan of the 20th century. World War I had just ended. Yet, deep within the victorious Allied coalition, profound suspicion and mistrust were brewing. On one side stood the British Royal Navy, ruling the seas for centuries. On the other, the rising economic superpower, the United States.
Tensions reached a breaking point over the repayment of billions of dollars in war debts owed by Britain.
Even after the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty, a fierce struggle raged between Washington and London over who would control the seas.
The American general's greatest fear was singular: secret British diplomatic maneuvering.
If the British royal family joined forces with Asia's rising power, America's downfall would be inevitable.
This potential Anglo-Japanese axis held the capacity to trap and blockade America across two oceans simultaneously.
The Pentagon reached a chilling conclusion. If war became unavoidable, America had to strike first. This gave birth to the United States military's color-coded war plans.
In May 1930, U.S. Secretary of War Patrick Hurley officially approved War Plan Red. In this plan, all enemy nations were assigned fictional code names. The primary enemy was designated RED. India was named Ruby, Australia was Scarlet, and South Africa was referred to as Pink.
The core objective of the plan was to sever every economic lifeline of the British Empire. American strategists knew that attacking the British Royal Navy directly in home waters was an impossibility.
Launching an assault on London meant risking their own fleet thousands of miles away from home.
Therefore, American generals turned their focus toward Britain's largest backyard and most vulnerable point,
Canada. Given the secret code name in War Plan Red, Crimson.
The Pentagon's military calculus was brutally simple.
If Canada could be overrun in a swift first strike without warning, Britain would be crippled. The British Army would never be able to use North American soil to launch a major offensive against America.
Under the plan, the U.S. Army would cross the border suddenly, without any formal declaration of war.
Armored columns from New York and Vermont would simultaneously descend upon Montreal and Quebec City.
Eastern Canada was scheduled to be brought under American control and cut off from the rest of the world. Simultaneously, infantry forces from North Dakota would launch a surprise attack on the city of Winnipeg.
Seizing Winnipeg meant severing Canada's Pacific Railway in a single stroke.
Routes would remain for Canada to transport supplies and troops between East and West.
On the West Coast, American forces would advance from Seattle to capture the port of Vancouver.
Yet, the Pentagon's most cunning and destructive target was Niagara Falls.
American engineers knew the hydroelectric power plant at Niagara was the core energy hub of all Canada.
Capturing this plant and flipping the switch would plunge Canadian industry into darkness in a single second. Before Canadian citizens could even react, their communications and power infrastructure would be completely paralyzed.
However, the bloodiest and most terrifying chapter of War Plan Red was reserved for the port of Halifax.
Halifax was the sole Atlantic port where the Royal Navy could easily land millions of British troops. The Pentagon gave explicit orders. Halifax must be obliterated at any cost to ensure no British ship could anchor troops or ammunition onto North American soil.
To achieve this goal, what the American military authorized still makes your skin crawl today.
Crush Canadian military and civilian resistance. The use of toxic chemical gas in Halifax was authorized. Defying the Geneva Convention,
A blueprint was drawn for a lethal first-strike chemical attack against a neighboring country.
Historical records reveal that a renowned American aviator secretly flew over Canadian skies, documenting strategic terrain as tensions quietly escalated. Lindbergh secretly gathered data on which cities would suffer the greatest devastation if chemical gas were dropped.
Many might think this was merely paperwork left in an officer's drawer. But the preparations were 100% real.
In 1935, the U.S. Congress secretly approved a $50 million budget, billions in today's money. Using these funds, 3 secret military airfields were built near the Canadian border, completely hidden from public view. On government records, these airfields were claimed to be ordinary commercial airports. That same year, the U.S. Army conducted the largest military exercise in its history at Fort Drum. Nearly 36,500 troops officially rehearsed an exact invasion of Canada and trained for war.
But the Americans did not know that the Canadians were not sitting idly by. Nearly a decade before the American plan, Canada crafted its own secret blueprint in 1921.
Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Buster Brown formulated Defense Scheme Number 1.
The Canadian strategy was fiercely dangerous, yet clever. They would not wait for an American attack. Before the Americans could strike, Canadian flying columns would cross the border and launch attacks inside U.S. territory.
They would simultaneously seize Seattle, Spokane, and Albany, destroying railway lines deep inside America. Canada's objective was not to conquer the United States, but to shock the Americans and buy time.
So that the Royal Navy could cross the Atlantic and save Canada from certain destruction.
North America was standing atop the most explosive secret military powder keg in history.
Why did this bloody world war ultimately fail to happen? The answer lay in the rise of an authoritarian regime in Europe. The rapid rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany overnight reshaped global geopolitics. With the outbreak of World War II in 1939, Washington and London came to a sobering realization.
They understood that fighting among themselves meant handing the entire world over to Hitler.
The Pentagon hastily scrapped War Plan Red, abandoning years of tactical planning, and the two nations plunged into war against the Nazis as the strongest, most formidable allies in world history.
For nearly 4 decades following, the files of War Plan Red remained locked inside the vaults of the U.S. National Archives.
When these files were declassified and revealed to the public in 1974, global politics was stunned.
Top leaders in Canada and Britain could hardly believe their closest ally had engineered such a plan.
These old Pentagon files prove one truth. On the stage of politics, there are no permanent enemies or eternal friends. In the ruthless pursuit of national interest and power, yesterday's ally can quickly become tomorrow's adversarial threat. Had War Plan Red ever been executed, the geopolitics of North America and the entire world order would have been forever altered. To uncover more hidden stories buried by history, subscribe to the Shadow Archive Docu channel. Let us know in the comments what you want to see next.